What's going on, everybody? Got kind of a strange topic tonight, and it's something I'm thinking about for a while. When you got a prison here we're talking about, not jail, because jail, you can go to jail for being drunk in public, as Ron White said. But when you got a prison, it's kind of presumed that you've been convicted of a felony because you don't go to prison unless you have a felony. You don't go to prison for misdemeanors, certainly. But a lot of people have said, and it's a common thing, that when people go out of prison, the one of the complaints they may have is they can't seem to get a job, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. And talk about my experiences with having work from 2015 until now, and that includes being in a halfway house. It includes a lot of different economic situations over the last 5 years for me. And then right now with this pandemic that we're dealing with, it's a little more complicated, but kind of try to talk through it. But I personally have had applications or jobs that I've applied to, or interviews, or questions on applications, or throughout the application process, as far as the computer testing they may have you do for a given job, or the interview, or ever before it ever gets to that point, I think, probably. But I do have a felony conviction, and the best way that I've learned to handle that, because you have a few different things. You have some places that say, we're going to ban the box. We're not going to ask you about your criminal record before we get to at least to the interview process, maybe, or maybe somewhere in there. You have other places that say, we want to know if you've ever been charged, convicted of a felony at all. They may do that. You have other places that don't ask you, and then later on, potentially, when you get the job, because you interview well and you have whatever they want to have for their applicants, you get the job, and then 6 months later you get fired because you didn't disclose that. Or that's kind of something maybe that you should have disclosed for certain types of jobs. You could see where that gets into it. But generally, when you have a criminal record, it's going to be a barrier. That permanent record they talk about when you're in school, it exists, and I think this is probably what it is. This is your permanent record. So when you make mistakes in life, there's going to be consequences to that, even after you've done what society says is your time, or is your punishment or penalty for that given situation. So when I first got out of prison in 2015, the first halfway house I went to, it was a money, power, greedy place. All they cared about was you paying your fees that they required, and they waited a month for you to have to start paying that. The problem is that you've been out of prison for a month, that you could go and maybe look for a job, but they expect you to have one certainly within that month, or just at the end of that month. And for times that you weren't able to work or couldn't find a job because no one wants to hire a convicted felon, that part is true. A lot of jobs, there's a few different classes of jobs, I guess. There's jobs that are felon friendly, and there's some that are decidedly unfriendly when it comes to applying and trying to get a job there at a given place. Some of those places are kind of obvious, common sense. You shouldn't go to the police department and try to apply for a job. You shouldn't go to a bank. Probably not going to work out. The problem is that a lot of companies handle money. The thought is, I guess, if you have a conviction for a felony, you've proven you're not trustworthy, and so maybe you can't handle money. That's fine, but every company has something of value. So if you're just a total thief-minded individual and you've not learned your lesson, then maybe that's going to be a problem. The average person, it could go a few different ways. So I think companies look at it wrong, and I think they generally, they're protecting themselves to an extent, but I think it goes beyond that sometimes, and to to the point of what I would call discrimination. It really isn't discrimination. It's totally legal. They can, in most places, they can not hire you for any reason, or fire you for any reason, or hire you for any reason. The problem is they have to find another reason to say that they're not hiring because they have a better person or whatever. Or they might come out and just flat out say it. We're not hiring you because you have a conviction for a felony. Whatever it may be. And for however long ago it may be. But when you apply for these jobs, I think the best way to deal with that is to disclose that honestly up front. Where that way there's no confusion. There's no surprise. And, they may say, we're not going to hire you because of your record. And you can move on. You can go somewhere else and try to get something somewhere else. You're not wasting your time. But if you play the game, I call it, I guess, and you don't disclose that, they don't specifically ask for that, and then later on, are you going to be wondering, are they going to come in and fire me today? You've worked there 6 months a year. You have a certain quality of life that you've built and established and expect a certain amount of income, and you've based your budget around that income. Well, then it goes away because you get fired because they find out that you were on a 2-county police chase or whatever the situation was, and they fire you. It's unfortunate, but it happens every day. The halfway house that I went to after the one that I went to initially when I was released was the complete polar, total opposite, and they really cared about getting the person up to strength. As far as reviewing your resume, they had contacts with some places that were, would hire you. They tried to help with that. The first job that I had though when I was released was through a temporary service. The company that I worked for ultimately wasn't a bad company. They're an international company, and they make hydrogenated soybean oil and other wax type products for food and also for Yankee Candle Company. But the temp service that I worked for, they were kind of neat. It's something I've never seen before and haven't seen it since, honestly. But on the application, they ask, have you ever been convicted of a felony or of anything? And then below that, the next question was, what have you done since your release and how have you changed your life since then? Something I've never seen before or since then. That was very interesting, and they were certainly very accommodating and understanding with situations. Now, you couldn't come to work for them, be late every day, and then say, oh, you're firing me because of my felony. No, you're not. You're just lazy. There's a difference. So, worked for them for a while. The company wasn't bad. The job was pretty crappy, honestly. It was $10 an hour, which was enough compared to what I was getting before, which was nothing. But, I applied a lot of different places, and I applied a lot of different types of places. I kind of limited myself to places that common sense says that I could probably get the job. I applied at several different temp services. Monster, Career Builder, those kinds of things online. I went to all those and went to jobs that I thought I could reasonably get. Worked on a resume, got that kind of up to speed. Worked at this temp service for a couple of months, and I found something better. Something better came along, and I got more money, and the job was a little bit less. I'm not going to say less manual labor, but it was less hours at a time because the one job was 12 hours at a time, and it was a rotating shift, so it was just exhausting pretty much. The other job was 8 hours a day, and it was working in a place that was a union carpentry type shop, and they made different things, bed rails and handrails for stairs and bed parts. Got to use different machines, glue press and finger joiners and those kinds of things. One of the things I did when I was in prison was carpentry, so that was neat for a while, and then the novelty of it, I guess, wore off. And then I found the job that I do now that I've done pretty much consistently for the last 4 years, and that's doing traffic control for utility companies in the area. So got a lot of training with that, got a lot of practical experience, and I've helped some people that I know to get involved in it, and they found other things, maybe they didn't like it, but the point of all that, and that's what I do now, and I do security as well. That's what I'm doing right now every weekend. Make a little bit extra money, but as a convicted felon, you're going to be limited in the types of jobs you can get. You're not say that you're totally precluded from any job, because you're not. It's all up to the employer. The other thing that you're going to see is that people are going to start their own companies, and that can range from something legitimate and valid and legal to something that's just a shell. That maybe they start this company in their wife's name or their girlfriend's name or a friend of theirs name, because the state may require the person that owns that company to be someone with a clear record, whatever it may be. But and I think there's some common sense for that, in that if you own your own company, then you can hire and fire who you want. You can do what you want in some sense. And so you get out of that institutionalization, that prison mentality of being told what to do, and you apply that to from a corrections officer or a warden or the state or a court to your boss or supervisor, and you can kind of see some parallels there. But I think the biggest complaint that people say, and that, I understand it, I can see where it would be valid, but I think ultimately it's kind of a cop-out, it's kind of an excuse, and it's not really helping anything. Let's say I can't get a job. You may not be able to get that job you had before you went to prison the first time, if it's your first time. You may not be able to get that job that you're in a position of trust, but you can find something that works for you, that you can enjoy, and you can make decent money and make a living and survive and do things legally. And that's what I do now. I don't break the law. I was talking to someone tonight. I don't break laws anymore. They're not for breaking, and they're there for a reason. And there's consequences, and I've seen those consequences, and I don't want to go back. There's a difference between getting caught doing something bad and then just not doing anything really overtly bad. I mean, people, they might speed or which is not safe. It's not. There's speed limits for a reason, but there's small and large scale things. I think when you go to prison, you begin to look at things a little differently, and that you see where small things can become very large things very quickly, especially if you have a record. So, but I don't really feel that I don't feel that well, I'm a convicted felon, I can't get a job, so I'm just going to go back to selling dope. Well, maybe you just like selling dope. I don't. I've never sold dope before. I don't know what it's like. It's probably pretty crappy. I've seen a lot of guys that are in prison because of dope, one way or another. So it's a big thing that ties a lot of those those stories and cases in. So, a little frog in my throat. But, while a conviction for a felony does severely limit what you may or may not be able to do, it isn't a total handicap. And it's only so if you let it be that way. I've worked from the time that I'm 37. I've worked from the time I was 15, 16. I worked the entire time in prison. So, the poor me, whatever, it's whining, I think, honestly. Not to say that in some places, I live in a relatively large city, but, to say that some places that are smaller, they may have different attitudes about it, and you may have a harder time. It may be impossible to get a job there. Then move if you can. You may have parole or probation. That becomes an obstacle. You have to kind of adapt to those things and do what you can within your means. But the one thing that I'll say about jobs and discrimination and employers and convicted felons coming back into the community, prison isn't known for making a very good product. They just don't. They make people that are locked up that may have a bitter attitude in society, and if you constantly shove that in their face by saying, we're not going to hire you, we're not going to rent to you, it's going to create, and it does create, it's happening every day now, it does create problems that people complain about the problems, but they don't want to fix the solution. Find the solution to the problem and fix it. Would I want someone that's touched children working at my kids' daycare? No, I don't. Would I want someone that's been convicted of arson working at the fire department? Of course not. But you have to draw reasonable lines in things, and to give people a chance that maybe they've fixed their life and that maybe they've realized this isn't for me. I don't want to go back. I don't want to go back to prison. I don't want to go back to showers with just men or whatever it may be. But you have to give people a chance, and society's attitude needs to change with that to a reasonable degree. Kentucky, where I live at, they a couple years ago they put a bill, tried to put a bill forward to make jobs that had licenses tie the denial of a license to someone's record, and the I guess the burden was on the person who would grant the license to say why the conviction should bar the person who had the record in this situation from getting that given license, whatever it may be. It's a plumber, a CPA, whatever it may be. There's convicted felons that are the deans, assistant deans of law schools, major law schools. So they've obviously passed the bar. They become attorneys. There's people that are public defenders, and they're working in the public defender's office. I've seen, not here in Kentucky, but out west, and they've been able to sit for the bar. They've passed the bar exam, and they're attorneys now. So there's other people that are doing different things that have records that they wouldn't ordinarily be able to do, and I wish them the best of luck. But I think you have to start somewhere, and if it's a temp service, if it's 1099 type thing, if it's an every now and then kind of a job, whatever it may be, get something and earn your money and do what you can and stay out of that place, because it is a revolving door if you play the game and go back in the door. I just don't want to go back in the door. So there's a difference between getting caught doing something and just not doing anything that could send you back to prison, and realizing that these actions that I may be doing right now have consequences, and I don't want to do anymore. And that's where I'm at with it. I'm too old. I'm too, I guess, invested in, and honestly, this is my honest feelings here, but I'm too invested in a society that doesn't want me. And that's how I feel every day. And it's not, that part isn't like a whining kind of a thing or whatever, but I wish people would understand how someone feels that, goes to work every day, doesn't break the law, tries to help people where he can, and to be told that, I can't vote, or I can't do a lot of things that have a conviction for a felony, which is a part of it, that I can't do. And then the attitude of, well, you did this 11 years ago. We don't want anything to do with you. We're not going to rent to you. You make enough money. You do all these things, and that's fine. You have all these good references, but you did something 11 years ago, and we're going to hold that against you forever. What do you think that's going to engender? What do you think it's going to create in a person? And so that part needs to change. But I can say this, in where I live at, in my situation, what I went through, it was never hard to find a job. It's a matter of if it's the kind of job you want to do, that's something different. But finding a job, it's not hard. Even in the pandemic right now, I haven't worked really at all the last 9 months, like a lot of people, since March. But it's difficult right now, but a lot of places are hiring. So get out there and do what you can, and don't ever give up. And it's easier said than done, I'm sure, I know, but it's something you have to wake up and know that you're not going to fail, and you're not going to lose every day, and you're going to get told no 90 times, 99 times, but somebody's going to say yes, and you have to take that chance and say, I'm not going to screw this up. And you can't screw it up. You have to live through and follow that through. So that's the big thing, I think, is that yes, there's resistance. Yes, there's jobs that you can't do. Yes, there's jobs you may want to do, you may used to do, you can't do anymore because you have a record now. I guess the solution to that would be don't get a record. While in the situation, you have one, accept what you can do, and try to move on and try to keep going. So if you have any comments, please leave them down below, and I will definitely respond back. Thank you, and be safe, everyone.